Hello and welcome to the debate on Sky News. I'm Anna Jones. Here's our take on developments brought together from America, the UK and around the world.
Love to see is gun owners, responsible gun owners, hunters, form a different organization and take back the Second Amendment from these extremists.
Mass shootings and child victims. Should the president be taking executive action on gun control? And Donald Trump's vow. He's not a quitter, he's going all the way, and he's going to win. President Barack Obama has made gun control his top priority, and the three leading Democratic presidential candidates have injected renewed vigour in their push for restrictions. That said, Republicans and the NRA continue their mantra: the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is with a good guy with a gun. So is it? Well, as usual, the Democrat commentator Jeffrey Robinson is in New York for us, and the Conservative commentator Armstrong Williams is in Washington. So welcome to both of you. Armstrong Williams, to you first of all. 11-year-old suspected of shooting dead an 8-year-old. The Oregon shootings leaving 8 dead. Is it time for gun laws to be reviewed in the US? Is Hillary Clinton right?
You must respect human life, and there's no question when you hear the story of an 11-year-old shooting another child to death with a gun, is heart-wrenching. But unfortunately, Anna, these stories are not new. What we see in Oregon is not new. It is becoming routine in the United States, and this will continue to happen. If someone decides to get a firearm and go out and want to create a massacre because they have mental illness or they're terrorists, there's very little you can do it. Now, you may be able to minimize it by having well-trained security guards on the premises, and that becomes an expense for universities and high schools that sometimes cannot afford it. It's not in their budget. But passing more legislation, we've had this debate before. And even if you look at the Democratic candidates, certainly candidate Bernie Sanders is not where Mrs. Clinton is. He believes that you should limit it in background checks, but he's also been a very strong supporter of much of the NRA legislation through his career in the Senate. I understand that Mrs. Clinton is on the campaign trail, and I'm sure she's outraged, as we all are, by the senseless violence in Oregon. But we have to count our wheels and see what we can do to keep illegal guns out of the hands of people who would commit these kind of crimes, and do a better job of vetting these young people for mental illness before they commit these crimes.
Jeffrey, what do you make of it? I mean, is anything likely to change? With Republicans unlikely to back anything, will there be any kind of reform?
Well, you see, the Republican argument, of arm the good guys, would be when the 11-year-old goes to shoot the 8-year-old. If the 8-year-old had a gun, he wouldn't have gotten killed. I mean, it is a completely wacko, delusional, ignorant, stupid argument, especially because the Republicans and the NRA, especially the NRA, the leadership of the NRA, not the members, because the members want legislation, but the leadership of the NRA misstates the Second Amendment all the time. Now, when the Second Amendment was first proposed in 1789, it read, "The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, semicolon, a well-armed and well-regulated militia being the best security of a free country." And then there was an interesting clause that said, "But no person religiously scrupulous of bearing arms shall be compelled to render military service in person." So the Second Amendment, when it was proposed, was originally talking about a militia and bearing arms as part of an army. Now, it was then revised, and they took out, or they added, after a regulated militia, composed of the body of the people, again referring to an army. When it came before Congress to be ratified, it was reduced to, they took the conscientious objection status out, and it was reduced to the 27 words that it is today. But the original version that was put before Congress capitalized the word militia, again, a reference to a standing army. The NRA believes that it refers to anybody bearing arms to protect themselves as opposed to an army. And when it last came up before the Supreme Court, Justice Scalia, in his idiotic ruling against the city of Washington to have regulated guns, completely disregarded the first half of the clause about a well-regulated militia. And the words well-regulated are still there. That's what we need, is well-regulation.
OK, well, that's where you two stand. Let's bring in an expert now. Charles Gallagher is Professor of Sociology at Salle University in Philadelphia. Charles Gallagher, good to talk to you. Grisly statistics coming out in the wake of this terrible shooting in Oregon in which 8 people died, including one statistic that suggests that there are more guns than people in America at the moment. How do people react to mass shootings and hearing figures like that? Do people want tighter controls, or do they want looser controls on guns?
Most people in the United States absolutely want more gun control. And I say this, if you look at the statistics, people that own guns, 87% of all gun owners want more background checks. Unfortunately, as we were talking about, the NRA has such undue influence on politicians, particularly Republicans, because they're terrified that they will lose a tiny part of the constituency. And in races, especially national elections, people win by very small margins. I think that what needs to happen is this needs to be reframed as a public health issue. And this is simply what it is. And the government has the ability. There's a famous line that state ways can change folk ways. And by that, they mean, the government through public policy can change culture. And you can look at slavery, the women's right to vote, interracial marriage, now gay marriage. After a generation or two, it becomes normative. Think about drunk driving laws. They're new. Seatbelt laws. They're new. Having a sin tax on cigarettes. That's new, and it changed behavior. What we need, and which we do not have, is the political will to do it. We have spineless Democrats. We have Republicans that are completely pandering to a tiny fringe of their party. Until we have people stand up and say, this is a public health issue, we are not going to move forward at all. It's going to be gridlock.
And how do people act? Do they actually think, well, if there is going to be some kind of change, if there's going to be a clampdown, I'll go and get myself a gun now. And look how dangerous it is out there. We see mass shootings. I need to protect myself.
Yeah, so mass shootings really, what happened, of course, is horrible. But if you look at the way that these guns are used, handguns, the number one use of it is suicide. And then it's homicide. And those homicides are typically people that know one another. Mass shootings, in terms of the total amount of shootings per year, is minuscule. And the fact is, the United States is safer now than it's ever been. The real problem, if you say there's one gun for every person in the United States, really isn't true. It's one person having 14 guns, one person having 22 guns. These are people that really are typically unstable. So most people in the United States aren't walking around armed to the teeth scared. What we have is basically a very, very strong, small lobbying body that's able to convince Congress and the United States that the world is dangerous and that an 8-year-old needs a gun, and every kindergarten teacher should have a gun. I'm a teacher. I don't want my students to have guns in the classroom. I don't think professors should have guns. It's simply nonsense. And until we get some politicians that are going to spell it out, and Hillary Clinton, she's pandering. She's playing it down the center. It's opportunism all the way. She's not proposing anything that's new. We are just spinning our wheels. And 2 weeks from now, we won't be talking about Oregon. It'll be back to normal.
So, Armstrong, what do you make of that? Let's talk about the background checks that Hillary Clinton is talking about making tighter. There is this strange anomaly, isn't there, where people can buy guns online or at gun shows without the same kind of background checks. Shouldn't that be changed?
It is reasonable with these private gun owners, sellers, that they just don't sell someone a gun immediately on the spot without at least a 10, a 15, and maybe a 30-day background check, their record, their history, their profile. I mean, that is absolutely reasonable. If you look at what happened in Charleston, South Carolina, and there's families, and Pastor Pinckney died in that church for no reason at all. This kid was before, and they had an opportunity to revoke giving him the gun, and somehow or another, with everything in place, he still was able to get through the system, and he was granted the license. So even sometimes, Anna, when the system's in place and everything is in order with the guidelines, sometimes law enforcement and the vetting process don't do their job, and they still slip through the system. I think it's so disingenuous of the professor to make it seem as though it is Republicans, a skewed number of Republicans are the reasons why this issue will never change.
Of course, it's the Republicans. Who do you think it is? I mean, if the Republicans voted for sensible gun legislation, it was the Republicans who repealed the Brady Act. I mean, the idea that you can walk down the street with a Kalashnikov, it's ridiculous. Of course, it's the Republicans pandering to the NRA. And again, the NRA's got the Second Amendment wrong. Now, in the city of New York, where I am, it's really, really, really hard to buy a gun. You have to go through all sorts of hoops to do it. However, you can go down to Virginia to a gun show, buy one at a gun show, put it in your pocket, and drive back to New York, and you've now got a gun. There are gun regulations that have never been discussed. For instance, a criminal who is out of prison on parole is not allowed to have a gun, and that's by statute. The NRA doesn't tackle that one because everybody knows what a bunch of wackos the Republicans and the NRAs are, and they wouldn't dare go near that one because it's just so obvious that criminals should not have guns. The fact is, there was once a fairly jokey explanation of how this could all be solved, and I don't know, we'll ask Charles, and we're glad to have him back on the program, if it is even possible. If you can't regulate guns, what about regulating bullets?
Well, I think Patrick Moynihan said we should put a 10,000% tax on bullets as a way to basically address, since we can't do it with guns. But I just think that this whole conversation to me it's almost, we're in a dream world where there's some notion, and a lot of this paranoia is that I'm really having a gun, not because I live in a safe suburb where really what the danger is a raccoon in my trash can. It's that the government is going to take over. There's going to be some Black Hawk helicopters coming in and seizing me. There's going to be some kind of dictatorial government coming in and basically seizing my property, my family. This is the paranoia that just drives people to buy guns. And if you look at who buys guns, something happens in a city, and it's 50 miles outside of the city where people load up. A lot of this is the media. A lot of it is this kind of rabid kind of paranoia here on right-wing radio. And it certainly is. It's disingenuous to say it's not the Republicans. It is. It always has been, because it's a safe, sweet spot when you're running for election. Don't touch our guns.
Can I add something?
So, Charles, just very quickly, so you think it's fear is the main reason that people feel passionate about holding on to guns in America? It's more about that fear or about their right to do so, that the fact that it is the Second Amendment?
Well, first off, if you think about it, I think that there's this wrong narrative about everyone basically settling the West had a long and a rifle. It's simply not true. Guns were expensive. They were hard to maintain. Most people didn't have guns. It's an invention of the early 19th and 20th century. That's the first point, that we didn't have guns. This is about fear-mongering. Every single day, if it bleeds, it leads. You see it on television, and people think, oh, my God, I need a gun to protect my family. If you have a gun in your house, you're more likely to use it against yourself or somebody to be hurt by it than you are to protect yourself from any kind of home invasion. Guns in the household are dangerous, period. And that's what we need to get out.
Armstrong?
Listen, gun ownership in America is not a privilege. It is a right. And Americans like myself who owns firearms, who I'm proud to own firearms, own them all my life from my parents, are responsible, and many lives have been saved, and chaos has been prevented as a result of this gun ownership. If you think you can come on this show today and skewer gun owners, and if you think that anything's going to change in the United States, it's not going to change. There's not going to be a limit on guns. More people are going to go out and own guns, given the situation in America and what's going on with people who have no respect for these lives and these criminals who are willing to kill you at the drop of a hat. You all need to wake up and get with the times that we're in.
If you want to make an argument about the South, I had a right to property in slavery at one time, and that was changed. Laws that no longer work can be changed. So to say that this right is inalienable, that every person should have a bazooka or an Uzi, I mean, it's
a right, and you can't take it away, and you never will.
Charles Gallagher, do you think anything will change?
No, I don't, and I sadly I do not, because we have this fantasy of this idea of what the Second Amendment is now. It's a Clint Eastwood movie. It's a Tarantino movie. It has absolutely no relevance that civilian population should be armed with armor-piercing bullets. And we have politicians that are simply spineless. Again, we need to reframe the conversation away from this fanatical definition of the Second Amendment that's wrong and put it in a public health perspective. Most Americans want gun control. It's a tiny part of the population, the NRA, the lobbyists, that have hijacked the conversation. And that's our major problem.
Charles Gallagher, thanks very much indeed. Catch up with the Sky News debate on Apple TV, Roku and on Catch Up, and of course on skynews.com/US. Donald Trump's determination has taken another surge. His lead in the polls is narrowing, but he's adamant that he's going all the way and he's going to win the race to the White House. Well, let's get some insight now from Michael D'Antonio. He's a Pulitzer-prize winning author who's just written Donald Trump Never Enough. Welcome to you. Thanks so much for talking to us. Whatever you think of his politics, it's hard to deny, isn't it, that Donald Trump has livened up this presidential race. Has anything about the way he's carried out his campaign surprised you from your research into him?
No, not one thing. You know, he's a self-created man, and the creation that he made is of self-promotion, of marketing. He's a genius at gathering attention, and his popularity now is pretty consistent with his popularity over the decades. We've known him here in the States for about 40 years, and in all that time, he's consistently got 30% favorable and about 65% negative, and that's about where he sits today.
Is there any sign, do you think, of him running out of steam in this campaign?
No, I really don't. I think that he wants to get to the voters. So he wants their verdict, and that will start to be delivered in late January and in February when people actually consider who they want for president. I think up until this point, they're considering who they want to watch on television, and it's definitely Donald.
Jeffrey, you too won't be a natural supporter of Donald Trump, will you? But what do you make of his contribution to this race? Has it livened things up?
Yeah, well, full disclosure, I know Donald. I did a project with him. I like Donald a lot. He's a terrific guy. I've spent time with him, and he's good value. He really is. Now, I must say about Michael D'Antonio's book, it's a great book, and people should read it because he spent a lot of time going way back and explaining this phenomenon of branding, which is what Donald has done. Now, I believe something I heard recently, that life imitates high school. I really believe that. Donald is the big man on campus who is the guy first chosen on the Saturday night dance in the smelly gymnasium to do what we used to call the multiplication dance. I'm dating myself terribly. Carly Farina is the mean girls gym teacher whom everybody hates. Marco Rubio is the too short kid who wants to run for class dance committee chairman, and no one will vote for him. And of course, Armstrong's friend Ben Carson is the class geek who got voted off the chess club because he explained Korepesky's variation and got it wrong. Donald is a star. The others are not. Jeb Bush is nowhere. And he will continue and maybe even win both Iowa and New Hampshire. At that point, all the other clowns have to drop out, and the Republicans will have to make a very serious decision. Do we want the Donald with all his baggage, or do we want a serious politician who will give us much of the same Republican nonsense? I think Donald's in there with a real shot. I don't think he can beat Hillary, but I think he can beat all the other clowns.
Armstrong, do you agree with that? I mean, clearly you're campaign manager for one of the other candidates, for Ben Carson, but do you agree that he's doing rather well?
Business manager. I'm Dr. Carson's business manager. Listen, I almost find this conversation almost comical and entertaining because you have two people who admire Mr. Trump. They love his entertainment value, that people are watching the debates. And there's no doubt I have tremendous respect for Mr. Trump. I know Mr. Trump. I've interviewed him. But I actually believe, which they're not unwilling to admit, that Mr. Trump has reached his ceiling. That is why Carly Fiorina and Mark Rubio are continuing to surge. Mr. Trump is not moving up. Mr. Trump tapped into an anger and a resentment where the voters feel they're not represented, their voices are not heard, they don't fight for them in Congress, and they want anybody but an outsider. And Mr. Trump does add entertainment value, but his temperament, his willingness to say whatever he wants to say without any regards to whom he's saying it to, his attitude sometimes towards women, it has harmed him. And the fact that Mr. Trump speaks in sound bites, and if he ever has a chance of winning, coming close to winning any of these states, he has to speak with an intellectual substance. This will fade. Donald Trump is making way for a serious candidate who has the capacity to have the temperament, who doesn't appear to be a bully and combative. And while you may like the entertainment value and people are watching, in the end, Donald Trump, if someone ever surpasses him and takes over the lead, his ego cannot tolerate it. And if he starts sliding in the polls, he will drop out immediately. And don't take my word for it. He said it himself this weekend in an interview with NBC News, which tells you he's not in for the long haul. He's in for it as long as Donald Trump is doing well in the polls, because he feels that polls matters.
Michael Antonio, does Armstrong have a point there?
Well, I think perhaps the first thing I noted was that Donald's ceiling is about 30%, and he's never been above that in this election cycle, and he's actually never been above that in his life, and he's been the subject of polls, as I said, for 4 decades. I think given that Ben Carson is a neurosurgeon, it's interesting to observe that neurological experts talk about the gut having the second highest number of neurons in it compared with the brain. And it's far fewer, but Donald operates from the gut, and he doesn't really operate from his intellect. And Armstrong is correct that when you ask Donald for anything deep, he can't really dig down very far because he's not well read. Most of his positions are things that he's staked out on a soundbite basis. And he's been repeating the same things, which are mainly xenophobia on the international level and anger and fear on the local level since the 1980s. Way back, it was the Arab oil states he hated, and the Japanese were the wily competitors who always outfoxed us in negotiations. Today, it's the Chinese and the Mexicans, but it's the same dynamic. So I do agree that there's a limit to Donald's lifespan in politics, but given the field and its fractured quality, he could wind up at the convention either leading in delegates or being very substantial in his hall. And that's something that should give GOP graybeards pause.
And Jeffrey, presumably a lot of people will be impressed by his business success. He's also very, very famous, which helps him when he tries to promote himself. He's very hard to ignore.
Well, he's constantly promoting himself. I mean, that's what he does. Ask Michael what his office looks like. You see 1,000 pictures of him on magazine covers. Armstrong, of course, is dead wrong about this when he says that Donald will drop out as soon as his numbers start slipping. That's not what he said on NBC News at all on Meet the Press. What he said was, if my numbers reached the low numbers of a Chris Christie or a George Pataki down to 2% or 0%, he wouldn't stick around. Of course he would drop out, not when they start slipping. And the fact is, the others, Ben and Carly and the clown car, are not surging. The other Republicans are simply slipping back. Ben and Carly are standing about where they have always been. The others are slipping back. Donald is slipping back a little bit. But I don't think the 30% is a fair ceiling. Now, would I vote for Donald? I'm a Democrat. No, of course not. I'm going to vote for Hillary, and she's going to win. And she will win no matter who the Republicans put up, because the Republicans are not serious candidates. Donald is highly entertaining, and we live in the era of soundbite politics. Substance doesn't work anymore. If substance worked, we wouldn't have had George W. Bush. If substance worked, we wouldn't have had, but Mitt Romney wouldn't have got the nomination. No. Substance is not what it's all about. It's sound bites. It's coming across. Life imitates high school as the big man on campus and the one everybody wants to dance with on Saturday night. No, he's a star. And that's what politics has become. Sadly, I say, but that's what politics in America has become: television.
So, Armstrong, what do you make of that view? He's a star, and even if what he says you don't like, he's at least coming across as a man of authenticity. He's saying what he believes in. That's how it comes over.
You cannot make Jeffrey up. He's so consistent every week. That's why I love the brother. I just got to give it to him. You can't even get upset with the stuff that he says anymore. However, Donald Trump is a star. He's a reality star when it comes to The Apprentice. He's a star when it comes to his television and his real estate projects. But it's not the kind of star that the American people are looking for in the White House unless he can change and show that he can become presidential, that he has the class, that he has the temperament, that he doesn't demean women, that he doesn't demean Mexico, that he's not willing to just go jab the jab with Jorge Ramos and others like him. People want to believe that they have a commander-in-chief who will not fly off the handle, who has the discipline to learn and have a debate back and forth where you don't feel you can say you're fired or whatever else that Donald may do in a circumstance like that. Look, the world is open to Donald Trump if he's willing to learn, if he can be managed, if he can get a disciplined message. I think Donald Trump is at an age and stage in his life where he cannot be managed. He cannot be disciplined, and he will continue along the trajectory that he's on, and it will eventually lead to his demise and drop into a point in the polls where he will get out of the race.
OK, Michael D'Antonio, how far do you think he'll go?
Oh, I think he's going to stay in. I really do. I don't think it's in his makeup to quit unless he is reduced to that single-digit point. And I can't imagine that he will be. The observation that we are in a media political age is spot on, and Donald is the master of that. You know, like it or not, we've created this monster, and we have it, and now we're going to have to watch it for quite a long time.
OK, well, Michael D'Antonio, thanks very much indeed for your thoughts, and thanks as ever to Jeffrey and to Armstrong. And that's it for this edition of The Debate. You can continue watching Sky News on Apple TV, Roku and on Catch Up. And of course on skynews.com. Until next time, goodbye.